Good evening. Welcome to PoliticIt podcast. Tonight we have Carson Jorgensen. Carson, former party chair of the GOP in Utah, now a candidate for governor. So when you're going across the state, I know you've been to almost every county, right? What are you hearing, and what are the major concerns that people have?
You know, one of the biggest concerns I hear when we travel the state, and like you said, we've been from one end of the state to the other. We spent the last week in southern Utah, and this week we're in northern Utah. But one of the overarching concerns that we hear from one end of the state to the other, they're worried about the quality of leadership and the direction of our state and the direction that we have and continue to head. That seems to be at the top of everybody's concern. Underneath that, you hear about the spending and what we're spending on here in the state and how we're spending our taxpayer money. Education is always huge. People are worried about the things that are creeping into our public education and the federal money that is influencing our curriculum in the state. And the other ones, I mean, there is a big long list, but the other ones that are at the top of the priority list that we hear often are our infrastructure and, again, where this money is being spent.
So I would imagine that the major problems you see with infrastructure are more in the rural areas of the state, right?
Yeah, you see them in the cities too. We see our roads going to waste. We see, but look at rural right now. Prime example, we've got a dam leaking in central Utah. This provides water to communities, and it's a danger to the communities, but we haven't touched it in a long time. You see Highway 6. Year after year, this is a problem, and so many people are killed on that highway. Yet we can find $1 billion for a baseball stadium. We can find $1 billion for a hockey team, but we cannot find money to fix our critical infrastructure that plays into the everyday lives of Utahns.
So is that what motivated you to run for governor, or why are you even in this race?
Yeah. I've told you this before, but I got 5 little kids, and the direction of the state, honestly, keeps me awake at night because it's these blue state policies and this constant drift to the left. You've heard me say it before. We don't elect Republicans to wander down the center of the road. We elect Republicans to act like Republicans. And something that should concern everybody right now is the words 4 more years. Because can we take 4 more years? Because I know you feel it. I know everybody sees this drift. Can we take 4 more years? And that's the question I would pose.
So what's your solution to a lot of these things?
Yeah, evaluate where we're spending money. When we talk about the direction of leadership, it's time we had a Republican governor. I have a friend that kind of has a joke that says sometimes before he dies, he'd like to see an actual Republican governor. But we know what they look like. You look what DeSantis has done. You look at what Nome has done. You look at Texas. You look at all around. You see great examples of Republican governance. Where are we at? And that's somewhere we should focus because it is that direction, because it influences everything. It influences that spending. We talk about how much money the state's done over the past 10 years. They've doubled the budget. The population's increased 14%. The worst part of all of that, we've gone from taking $4 billion a year from the federal government to $9.5 billion a year to pay our bills here in Utah. 1/3 of our budget is paid by the federal government. I don't know about you, but I can't think of a worse thing right now than to hitch our wagon to the federal government. And then it trickles into education. The things our kids are learning in school and those bad policies that we're seeing in schools, they're coming from that money we take from the federal government. And those things are not Utah values that are being taught to our children.
So how do we stop that?
When you look at it, you've got to take a step back and evaluate where we're spending that money. Again, we can find $1 billion for a baseball stadium. We can find $1 billion for a hockey team. But we are taxing for things that we want and not for things that we need. And that is an important distinction that we need to know. What is the proper role of government? How are they spending taxpayer dollars? And where should government be involved? And that plays a huge part into the direction of our state.
So you know, I just last week, I mean, rich states, poor states, again, the ALEC group came out and said 17 years in a row, we have the best economic outlook of any state in the U.S. So how can that be, and then things be as dire as you're talking about?
Yeah, when we talk about them, I don't think the things we can always say that they're dire because the public will always keep moving. And I attribute what we do here in this state to the public. Government so often tries to take credit for it. We have a great economy because of the people, because of the workforce, yet government tries to take credit for it. And so when we look at those statistics and those numbers that come out, I attribute a lot of that to the economy. But when you step back and you actually look at this doubling of the budget, how do we continue to spend this way? Where does it end? How do we stop it? Those are the questions we've got to start answering.
And what do you propose?
Look at our budget. Where are we spending? So there are things that happen, such as the baseball stadium. It's $1 billion. Go down. The Office of Families, homelessness. We've added billions upon billions of dollars to our budget. You look at Medicaid expansion and the things that we've done there. We have to start taking a hard look at where we're spending. Not just that, but the wasteful spending. You and I both know you give government money and they take it, they attach a bunch of strings to it, and they send it back to us. You can't tell me that they are spending that money properly. And that's something, again, let's take a look at where these budgets are going over. Again, the use it or lose it part of our spending. We know that government doesn't spend efficiently, but yet at the end of the year, these entities have this money and they say, if we don't spend it, they're going to take it away. So we need to start being able to roll over these budgets to be able to say, okay, if you're being wise with your money, we're not going to penalize you for it. And that's somewhere we can start.
Very, very good. Hey, we're going to take a break and we'll come right back. Hey Siri, how do I get to the state capitol?
John, the fastest way to get to the Capitol is to make a lot of empty promises, to get help from special interest groups and endorsements from politicians. You will also need to buy a better suit.
That's not going to work for me, Siri. You need to find another way.
John, listen to me. If you're going to win your race, you will need to play the political game. You also need to use more hairspray and buy a golden retriever. Also, a new phone case would be nice.
That's enough of this.
John, are you there? Did you just leave me on the road? Fine. Keep your principles, John.
My name's John Johnson. I'm not running to be part of a system, and I don't owe anyone special favors. I'm running to listen to and work for you. I'm running to get results. Welcome back to PoliticIt. We're here with Carson Jorgensen, candidate for governor. So let's talk. Before the break, we talked a little bit about education. We were getting into that conversation. I find it incredible personally. I mean, I've chaired education the past 4 years. In that time period, we put $3 billion new dollars into education. 2 of the biggest raises in history. Last year was over $200 million that we added for one of the biggest lump sum raises that we've had. But yet I've got the teachers union and others, down my back because I'm not doing supposedly what they want done. Where's the disconnect, do you think, between the education establishment, let's say, the unions, and what actually happens in the classroom?
Sure. Let's talk about the money first, because as you know, we've talked a lot about that. So let's talk about education funding. As you said, over the last couple of years, we've added $3 billion to education. Teachers raises, $200 million. What happened to the other $2.8 billion that we've added into education? Because as we've talked, much of the schools and that we're building, that's coming out of property taxes, not this money that you're adding. The administrative state is eating up that money. We are adding layer upon layer of administration, and that comes from taking that money from the federal government. Is the juice worth the squeeze when it comes to that money that we're taking from the federal government? Because last we checked, about 9% of our public education funding came from the federal government. That's about $650 million. It's time we get rid of the federal government in our public schools, because the things that they're teaching them and the things that you're fighting against, those are the things that are coming from the federal government. And that's where the teachers' organizations, that's why they're coming after you, is because it's not about the money. It's about these things that they're trying to drive to our children.
Yeah, it surprises me, when I first got into the debate on pornography in school libraries. I can't believe how much pushback we get. And when I finally looked into it and found out exactly what these books were doing, I was actually quite disgusted with it. And it seems like a lot of that's coming from federal groups.
Sure.
Right, pushing it in.
Again, when I talk about these federal groups and this federal money not teaching Utah values, this is exactly what I'm talking about. And this is why it is so important that we remove those strings from our public ed, that we as a state decide what we teach our children, that we set the curriculum. I mean, the governor came out the other day in a press conference and said that he thought he was the one that should appoint the state school board members. Man, we've seen what he's done to higher ed. The governor appoints the higher education boards. Look at our universities. Is that what we want from our public education? I know I don't, because it's supposed to stay close to home, that representation. And that's why we as a state should be setting our curriculum while your elected school board members watch over that. And that was how the system was meant.
So if you were governor, you wouldn't propose appointing a school board?
Absolutely not. Anytime you're taking a vote away from the people, you're making a mistake and taking away the representation. Look at the other things we've talked about. HB 545. The governor's been talking about it. The legislature has been playing with it, and that is to appoint the statewide officers, the treasurer, the auditor, the attorney general. This is a mistake, and this is a push that is coming from the top down, and we need to nip it while we can.
So tell me your version. Why is that a mistake for the governor to appoint the attorney general?
Yeah, why it's a mistake for the governor to appoint the attorney general. There are supposed to be checks and balances within government. That's what they were there for. But if everybody's appointing their buddies or their brother-in-laws to these positions, you don't have those checks and balances, and that's what government needs to stay accountable.
So you would continue on the course of those being elective offices?
Absolutely. Those are elected by the people. The people should have that representation because they are public servants, and they're the ones who should be making that call.
What about local school boards and stuff? What do we do there?
Again, we keep doing it. We've done well there. When you talk about our local school boards, that election from those people, you're able to hold those people accountable because they're the closest to you. And that local control and that local government is what government was meant to be. And so when you look at our school boards and our local school boards, they are the closest to the people. You can hold your friends and neighbors a lot more accountable than you can the governor.
So what can the governor do? So you're talking about all these issues, and you're talking about problems that we have. What can you do as governor? What's that role all about?
Yeah. The role of the governor is to set the priorities from the top. And it is an example. A lot of times people say, the governor is not over that. Well, that might be true, but they look to the governor for the tone. The legislature, you know this well. They look to the governor for direction as to where the state's going. And in every aspect, they set the tone. Again, look at what DeSantis did in Florida with the education system within the state and the government and the legislature, and the direction of change that Florida had within a few short years, all because of the leadership of the governor.
So that's coming from leadership then. And you see that as the vacuum that we have right now.
Absolutely. As I've said before, quality of leadership, direction of the state.
Okay. So tell me some of the other issues that people bring up to you when you're on the road.
Yeah. Everybody's always concerned about water. Water is always a big one. We dive down the list. The public transportation, the economy. Those are things, but everywhere has a different set. The other thing that I've noticed that seems to be a common issue throughout the state is the economy and the diversification of jobs. A lot of people complaining that there's not enough jobs anymore. We don't have an economic growth problem right now. We have an economic management problem because we are one-sided or another, depending on where you're at, on where the jobs exist. And so I go back to, let's continue to put in the infrastructure to diversify our economy, to make it so we don't put all of our eggs in one basket, like the technology sector. I love it. It's great. For a long time now, we've put a lot of emphasis into it while overlooking some of the blue-collar jobs and the manufacturing things that we really need in this state. So when a downturn comes in the technology sector, we don't have that buffer within the other trades and within the other job spheres to pick those jobs up.
So in rural Utah, I'm sure that's got to be a major issue where people are saying their kids are moving out, right? Because there's no jobs. But yet we talk about this housing problem. One of the biggest problems, I think, with housing is we're kind of running out of land in the Wasatch Front. The property's so expensive that makes housing pretty expensive.
Sure.
How do we make it so that children growing up in rural Utah can stay in rural Utah?
Yeah. Making it so kids can stay in rural Utah is important for a lot of people there because they want to have their families. We're a very close-knit community and we want to keep our families there. With that said, we have to evaluate what the government's job in that. Are we putting in the infrastructure that we should? The infrastructure. Look at agriculture, for example. This is one I use quite frequently. We used to have the infrastructure to diversify our products. We used to grow sugar beets. We used to grow snap peas and beans. Those are things we used to grow and had the economy to do so, but we removed the infrastructure to be able to get those to market. So now we've taken away those jobs. But you look at the energy sector. Our small towns run on these coal mines. In our town, you're either a farmer, you're a teacher, or you work at the coal mines. But this comes back to the battle on energy. We see these green groups constantly fighting us in our ability to create and produce our own energy. This is a detriment to the state and is a detriment to rural Utah.
Very good. So we're about out of time. You've got a convention coming up. You're a convention-only candidate.
Yeah.
You signed up for that to begin with. And you've got this other competitor. You've got the sitting governor. You've got another competitor from rural Utah.
Sure.
So why Carson Jorgensen?
Again, I love Phil. Phil's a great guy. We have a good relationship. That being said, you look at, he's sort of painted himself into a corner, and fair or not fair, he has things that will be used against him, and the governor is just waiting to be able to do that. And so when we look at it, this is going to come down to a primary race. Regardless of what happens at convention, we still have to go to a primary. Whatever you say can and will be used against you, and that's something that I believe I bring to the table. I have less things to go after, and I have been in politics, sure. I was the chairman of the party, but I am not a lifelong politician. I am a political outsider, and I've come to this from the outside saying, there is a problem that needs to be fixed. That's not going to come from within the walls of the Capitol. And so with that experience I bring with me, that we are going to change things, and that's where I think that I bring stuff to the table.
So make a final pitch to the delegates that are going to either elect you or not.
My name is Carson Jorgensen. I'm running for governor. If you're a conservative like me, the last words you want to hear in this race are 4 more years. I'm running against an incumbent. It's an uphill battle, and it's not going to be easy. I'm the only person in this race who never filed to collect signatures. I put all my faith in the convention and in the delegates. I know I'm the best positioned candidate to win in this primary. The donors are ready, and we might just get a key endorsement or two. I think that our best days are ahead. I believe in you, and I believe in Utah, and that's why I'm running for governor. I need your support. I'm asking for your vote at convention on April 27th.
Thank you. Carson Jorgensen. We'll see you guys next week.